manufacturing, service, and technology presence in Kentucky. It's about 30 facilities statewide. And just think, with this direct flight coming to our region, how many more we can look forward to in the future. Flights of British Airways Boeing 7878 Dreamliner aircraft will run 5 times per week during the summer and 4 times each week during the winter months. And this is an incredible way to celebrate 75 years of commercial flights at CVG. We're constantly looking to upgrade our state's infrastructure and opportunities, and this is a big one. The folks at CVG, from Candace McGraw to all the board members, do a really good job, and not just of operating an airport, but the economic development that comes along with it. Their airport's the home to the largest investment in the history of Amazon, to DHL's largest American presence, and so much more, and they continue to push and to work with us in such a seamless way. Pretty exciting. All right, this week we also made an important announcement about medical cannabis, which aims to help those suffering from chronic pain and terminal illness. Since day one of my administration, we focused on addressing the everyday issues, concerns that we have when we sit down at the kitchen table after putting our kids to bed. Those are things like having a good paying job, knowing that you're going to be able to provide not just food on the table, but opportunity for your kids, giving your kids the very best education, accessing affordable health care, and having the opportunity to live and prosper and to believe that American dream is still possible and that you are pursuing it. So we're doing everything we can to help our families thrive. But far too many people are facing things like chronic pain, terminal diseases like cancer. Remember, even if we're just talking about cancer, we have some of the highest rates in the nation, meaning our people are suffering. I've lost family members to cancer, and I know so many others have too. We also have Kentuckians suffering from PTSD, epilepsy, seizures, ALS, Parkinson's disease, and again, chronic pain. So we're working on expanding access to health care and treatments. Think about what opioids have done to us. Just devastated our state. 2,250 Kentuckians lost to an overdose in 2021 alone. So why, as Attorney General, I sued more of those companies than anybody else. What they did to us is unforgivable. But I also spent that time listening and learning and hearing people who would talk about alternatives to opioids that help them more without the side effects. A recent study showed 64% reduction in opioid use among chronic pain patients that are able to use medical cannabis. And certainly our tours of the state and comments that we receive suggest 90% of Kentuckians, the overwhelming will of the people, support medical cannabis. Yet the General Assembly has refused to pass it. So this week we heard voices like Jared Bonville, a veteran from Northern Kentucky, a true American patriot and hero that served in Iraq and Afghanistan. He described his struggle coming back, dealing with PTSD, being on 13 medications, growing so large he thought he only had a couple years left to live, and even considering suicide. Here's an excerpt of what he had to say.
You talked a bit again about how this has changed or saved your life.
Oh, absolutely. Before I started using cannabis and got Miss Recon here, I would maybe leave the house for 2 or 3 hours, and then I'd probably not leave again for a couple of days. I had 4 to 5 concussions throughout my tours, and I got to a point where if there was a word that was over 3 syllables or over 2 syllables, I couldn't use it. So I go from having several college degrees and not even be able to say a word. So that was one difficulty, but the suicidal portion of it, which to me, it didn't make any sense at all. There was a disconnect in my brain that made no sense. And the second I added medical cannabis to it, things got better. And it made no sense to me. But then when I started researching it, I realized, wow, this is amazing. The amount of research that currently exists is just astounding. And it's difficult to get it out because of the restrictions that our government puts on this. Most people are scared to discuss it in public. I mean, me, rightfully so, being a prior federal agent. This changes you. Now you realize that there's certain things out there that exist when used responsibly can do amazing work. I've seen it firsthand.
I want to thank Jared for his courage, and I want to thank him for his service. And he reminds us that this is not about me or the General Assembly or the executive branch or the legislative branch, or it's about him. And it's about people just like him that are suffering. Providing access to medical cannabis may be the difference between Jared being with us here today and gone from this earth. 37 states and the District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands all allow cannabis for medical use by qualified individuals. 2021, Alabama legalized medical cannabis. Mississippi and Rhode Island did the same in our neighboring states, Illinois, Ohio, Missouri, West Virginia. Red states, blue states, it's not a Democrat or a Republican issue. And because the legislature refused to listen to the people and ultimately passed medical cannabis, we spent a significant amount of time making sure that our group, the Team Kentucky Medical Cannabis Advisory Council, did just that. So this week, we issued 2 executive orders to move the state forward and hopefully provide relief to those suffering the most. First, I signed an executive order that allows Kentuckians who meet specific criteria to possess and use small amounts of medical cannabis. It's got to be legally purchased in another state, and it's got to be used to treat specific health conditions, and it also has to be under 8 ounces. You have to have documentation that shows that, and it begins January 1st, 2023. There are 21 medical conditions, many of which that we discussed. And yes, as we move forward, January was the date we chose because we're going to have to work through some things. Now, the fact that the legislature hasn't passed a full-blown system for medical marijuana requires not only that I do this, but also makes it challenging in how we implement it. The answer to any of those challenges is that they come in January and pass the full thing, and then I'm happy to rescind those executive orders. But until they act, it's my job to stand up and be there for folks like Jared, like the woman in her 30s or 40s that just reached out, suffering from stage 4 cancer that's beaten how much time that her doctors said she had left on earth 3 straight times, and credits this for her quality of life. These are our neighbors and our friends, and I'd much rather them have access to this than be taking 13 prescriptions that aren't helping. In a second executive order, I took action to make sure the state is regulating the sale of Delta 8. Delta 8 is a hemp product that contains THC, though it is at a lower level than marijuana. Originally, the Department of Agriculture tried to criminalize this product. A court ruled that it is legal and enjoined, whether it's the Department of Agriculture, Kentucky State Police, or any others from taking law enforcement action on it. That means we've got this thing out there and it's totally unregulated for the consumer. And so following regular statutory procedures, we have the authority to begin a system to regulate the packaging and the sale. What that means, since this is out there, is we can work to try to make sure that it is as safe as possible. What it also does is give us a dry run in setting up a regulatory procedure and training people who would be involved in it for full legalization of medical marijuana. It needs to be done, and we are going to get it done. All right, update on Eastern Kentucky floods. Since the last update, FEMA's approved an additional $1 million for survivors. So people who have a claim out there, keep pushing. Others that are getting dollars and getting significant amounts of dollars. But one of our biggest challenges, and this is on us, I've a number of criticisms of FEMA, but we have 2,221 homeowners or renters that are currently ineligible for help because they've either missed an inspection that was scheduled of their property or aren't picking up the phone when FEMA's trying to call them. So if you know people that are struggling, get them in a disaster recovery center. If you know people who haven't been able to push forward their claim, It may be that they're not picking up a number they don't recognize or didn't have transportation maybe to get to that inspection site. Get them here. I'm going to tell you, FEMA's given us these statistics to try to get folks to be able to perfect their claim. In other words, to get the money that they need. But we need to make sure that we don't have a single person that's ultimately denied because FEMA couldn't get in touch with them. So these recovery centers are going to close November 22nd. So get out there. If your claim hasn't been approved, if you haven't received enough dollars, we need you in these facilities up to that date. Then we can continue to push for your claim after that. But this is the time you can look someone one-on-one, eye to eye, about getting what you need for your claim. All right, thus far, total amount that FEMA has paid out, $88.1 million. They've approved 8,460 applications out of 16,030. That's north of 50%. That's better than I think in just about any other natural disaster. It's still not enough, but they have done, taken a lot of steps that we've never seen before. In new news, well, here first, National Flood Insurance Programs paid out $23.7 million. U.S. Small Business Association, $55.8 million. But the newest piece of news is the Kentucky emergency managers received 2 letters last week approving 13 Perry County properties for what's called FEMA's Property Acquisition Program. So this is a voluntary program through FEMA. And county and state participate in it too, where when people are living in a dangerous area that is not safe for them to rebuild, FEMA offers to purchase their property, giving them dollars to ultimately find a safer place to live. The project protects the community from the direct impact of severe storm events. And remember, if you live in a dangerous area and FEMA helps you one time, you may not be able to qualify the next. So this is the type of buyout that's supposed to give you a new start. Approvals of the program vary. The average time for application development is 1 year. This may be the quickest turnaround we have seen in this program in its history. The timing in this was incredible. It does suggest that FEMA is willing to move faster than ever before, which for people that, again, need to rebuild and find a new place. And we're working on giving them many options. This is an exciting development. So FEMA Region 4 staff deployed to Eastern Kentucky to assist KYEM and local communities with homeowner interest and application development. They're there to even help you get through the process. Through that collaboration, 13 families in Eastern Kentucky can now get out of the floodplain that wanted to in record time. So many thank yous to everybody who is participating in that program. We have 216 people sheltered in our state parks. Now 320 travel trailers on site, 660 individuals in them, by far the largest sheltering program we've ever run, and it continues to grow. Of the 150 households pending, this is a number of households, not all of which are willing to go to these sites. Some of them want private property access with a state sheltering program travel trailer on it. We are working with them to make it happen. Remember, before we can put a travel trailer on a site, it's got to be safe. That includes all the utilities and the inspections and the rest. And yes, it's a process, but it's one that's important that we do right. KYTC, we've now removed 30,168 truckloads of debris. 400.2 miles of creeks and streams have been cleared from flood debris. And as of today, 19 bridges have been repaired or replaced. Team Eastern Kentucky Flood Relief Fund. We've now sent over 7,800 checks for $500 to those approved for any level of FEMA assistance for $3.9 million. That's 101 new checks just this week. We paid for every single funeral, all 43. We have a new donor, HCA Healthcare, donated $100,000 to this fund since the last update. It's still very much needed. The dollars in this fund are less than they were in the Western Kentucky Fund. And there are other funds out there, and I hope together we're able to bring the same amount of assistance, but especially with the costs of building new homes right now going up, we are going to need more help for this fund. So please continue to be generous. Now, the Kentucky Arts Council is now also accepting applications for 3 programs to provide direct assistance to organizations, artists, and schools impacted by the flooding in eastern Kentucky, as well as the tornadoes last December in western Kentucky. The grants include, first, the Organization Relief and Disaster Recovery Grant that awards up to $5,000 in assistance. The second program, the Artist Rescue and Disaster Recovery Grant, that goes up to $5,000. And third, the Arts Education Relief and Disaster Recovery Grant that goes up to $8,000. You can visit artscouncil.ky.gov for information. In a few short weeks, we'll also approach the 1-year anniversary of the worst tornado event in our lifetime. An F4 tornado that stayed on the ground over 200 miles just in Kentucky. It took 81 lives, nearly wiped out my dad's hometown. Killed, I think, a dozen people in my mom's hometown. This and the flooding are the largest disasters we've experienced, certainly in any of our lifetimes. I'm proud that we were able to come together, executive and legislative branch, both in a regular session and then in a special session to create the SAFE Act funds for both of these areas. They've supported governments. They've supported utilities so we don't have to raise rates on people that are already struggling as we rebuild, say, water or power infrastructure. Together, we have opened up over $320 million between the 2 regions for the rebuilding effort. So today I'm announcing nearly another $12 million in awards from the Eastern Kentucky SAFE Fund and over $600,000 from the Western Kentucky SAFE Fund. Payments going out to Eastern Kentucky this week include $3.2 million to the Knott County Board of Education to ease their strained fiscal liquidity. Our school districts, schools in Knott County and others were hit so hard, they worked so fast. And it's incredible that they were able to get kids back in school when they did. I want to thank that superintendent, their school system, the county, and everybody who helped make that happen. This is how we can support them. $906,203 are going to the Knott County Fiscal Court to cover a FEMA match and to employ a floodplain planner. $226,160 is going to the Knott County Water and Sewer District. $6.2 million to the Letcher County Board of Education. Listen, they were hit just as hard as Knott County. Great superintendent there, wonderful principals, and how they were able to come together and stand up for those kids. Their schools in Letcher County and in most counties were also the place to go to get the much needed essentials. And what'd you see there? You saw our educators. You saw them, even though school was out, being there to help every single person. I hope this next session that the legislature will give them the raise that we absolutely must have with 11,000 teacher vacancies. But if nothing else, it's a thank you for being incredible people in regular times and in difficult times. Over $1.1 million is going to the Letcher County Fiscal Court for required FEMA project match and $31,000 to the Letcher County Water and Sewer District. Payments going out to Western Kentucky include $550,000 to the City of Bowling Green to restore some green space and $65,000 to the Princeton Water and Wastewater System. With this week's announcements, Eastern Kentucky has received over $14.9 million. This takes time. That will grow significantly. And Western Kentucky has received $42 million from their funds. Listen, I anticipate that Eastern Kentucky's will grow larger than Western Kentucky's, but you got to incur the expenses and then the dollars go out. So this fund's going to be in place for a long time, and most likely all of the funds that have been approved will be needed. This is all work by local leaders and utilities. Thank you for your continued work. And whether you're in Eastern or Western Kentucky and you are impacted, we aren't going anywhere until the job is fully done. All right, good news on wildfires. The recent rainfall provided enough moisture so that all wildfires from last week are either extinguished or controlled. I want to thank our Division of Forestry for their hard work. As of this morning, Kentucky's had 369 fires with 29,155 acres burned during just this season. We want to thank the state forestry agencies from Virginia, South Carolina, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, and Texas that sent crews. And I also want to thank various volunteer fire departments, firefighters from the Daniel Boone National Forest, inmates from the Bell County Forestry Camp, and conservation officers from the Kentucky Department for Fish and Wildlife. Man, these folks answer the call every time. They were also parts of so many of the rescues in eastern Kentucky. So, folks, almost all of these were preventable. Please be careful. When we're not careful about our actions, we can lose acres and acres of beautiful land. All right, let's talk public health for just a minute. Cold and flu season is underway in Kentucky, and this is going to be a worse year for respiratory pathogens. Think flu, RSV, and others compared to the last two. Respiratory diseases, including RSV and the flu, are spreading across the Commonwealth, and they are filling up especially our pediatric beds in 3 hospitals and almost all the ICU beds in the 2 that have them. Several school districts, including my kids, were closed last week or are missing days because of how many of these viruses are going around. It's impacting students and teachers. If we want to protect against this, and we don't want to have to cancel days, we recommend getting your flu shot and getting boosted for COVID. The COVID booster provides protection against Omicron that is out there and approaching the holidays, where we're going to get our youngest Kentuckians that are at risk of RSV and our oldest Kentuckians that are at most risk of COVID all coming together with the rest of us. Let's just do what it takes to protect them. Parents should make sure their children are up to date with all recommended vaccines, including the primary COVID-19 vaccines, as well as the new booster. Locations can be found at vaccines.gov. Let me give you a statistic that I know we can do better than. Current data from the CDC indicates only 8% of Kentuckians 5 and older have gotten the Omicron booster. This is great protection for what's going around right now. Please consider protecting yourself. When we look at Kentucky's children, during the 21-22 flu season, fewer than 50% got that flu shot. So please, influenza's at a widespread level. It's earlier and greater at this time than it has been in other flu seasons. So get the shot, get the booster, and folks, consider, especially if you're concerned about your health or other conditions, consider wearing a mask in indoor get-togethers right now. That's not forever. It's just as we get through what is being a really crazy flu and RSV season. Let's look at our COVID maps real quick. Here's the good news. It does look like we have plateaued. Even this map, which may have a little more yellow, it's probably about the same. It's just moved around a little bit. I think we have a slightly less red, and that's how, remember, these plateaus work. You bump up and down week to week, and you'll see that in the other numbers. If you look at the case count, we're going up and down, but that's always been the sign of a plateau. Remember, we have more cases than this. It's just with take-home tests, we don't get them all reported to us. Let's keep going. All right. So again, more proof of the plateau. Same thing we're seeing in hospitalizations. It goes up and down a little bit. This is some of the lowest hospitalization for COVID that we have had since the very beginning. This still remains really good news. And it just gets better when you look at ICU and ultimately ventilators. But I hope we can take some of these lessons that we've learned about how something like COVID spreads and try to keep our kids out of the pediatric ICU as well, given how few beds there currently are. We have 80 cases of monkeypox being reported from 18 different counties. We now include, when we break that out, a 16 to 20 year age group. More than 6,400 doses of monkeypox vaccine have been administered in Kentucky. Remember, this doesn't spread like the other viruses, and the vaccine is fully effective. We just had, as a country, to get enough vaccine to stop the thing. Okay, so next week we will not have this update. So I want to go ahead and talk about Shop Local this Christmas. And I know we haven't hit Thanksgiving, so I apologize for talking about Thanksgiving, about Christmas before. but this is really important. With holidays coming up, I just want to encourage everybody to shop local for the holiday season and explore the Kentucky Main Street communities across our Commonwealth. Our main streets are filled with local businesses that employ people you know. You can find gift ideas by visiting kentuckytourism.com/holidays. Dollars that are spent in our local communities stay in our local communities. So we started today with one set of Team Kentucky All-Stars, but I had to end with one more. Today we're celebrating a legend in the field of Kentucky journalism, Pulitzer-winning reporter Deborah Yetter. Over the weekend, Debbie shared that she completed her final day at the job at the Courier-Journal after 40 years. She calls those 4 decades exciting, exhausting, and rewarding. During those 40 years, Debbie provided the people of Louisville and Kentucky with reliable, informative journalism that made a difference. She covered the tough topics, lifting the voices of so many whose stories needed to be told, from child welfare cases to healthcare, coal country, and of course, COVID-19. Debbie was committed to getting the facts to the people. And for her remarkable work and loyalty to the people of Kentucky, she was rewarded, and rightfully so. In April, Debbie was inducted to the Kentucky Journalism Hall of Fame. Debbie, we talk a lot about building a better Kentucky. And through your work and your tireless efforts to keep people informed, I think there's been a lot of positive change, from legislation that passed because of stories you told to changes in different cabinets. Listen, I know it's your job to speak truth to power, and sometimes that's hard, but I hope you have a chance to look back and see all the positives that have come out of your commitment to your craft and your fearlessness in pursuing the truth. So I'm proud to name Debbie Yetter, our Team Kentucky All-Star this week. All right, with that, we'll turn to questions. And after that, I get to go join my kids at their school for Thanksgiving lunch. Excited about seeing the kids, not as excited about the lunch, but we'll see. All right, we'll start with Tom Latek, who's here, and then go to Natalia, and then those that are on the phone. I'm always excited to see Tom Latek.
I want to ask you a little bit more about that. You talked about the Perry County buyouts, if you will, for people in the dangerous area. Are there any other counties that are going to be covered under that program?
Oh, yes. We call it the FEMA buyout program. They have a longer title for it. We'll end up offering to purchase property from anybody who is seen as being in a dangerous area. I don't want to suggest that's all the floodplain, but that's one way to think about it. And it'll be offered especially to those that are advised that they won't get FEMA assistance in the future if they build back in a dangerous place. The goal here for me is if people can get enough from a FEMA buyout to get in a new home in a safe place, and they shouldn't be more in debt than they were right before this flood, then we'll have done our job. I will say our efforts on permanent housing continue. Land acquisition is the toughest part, but we are getting closer to it, and FEMA's being a great partner there. Natalia.
I wanted to ask you, given the problems at probation and parole with Fred O'Bannon being killed, Officer Chris Lane being shot, and then the problems at the Juvenile Detention Center in Linden, now the problems at the Juvenile Detention Center in Adair, how confident are you in the leadership of the Justice Cabinet?
Oh, I believe that Secretary Kerry Harvey is a dedicated Kentuckian who served as a U.S. attorney. I think he is dealing with serious and significant challenges in our justice system that go back long before he took over in that cabinet. We've seen changes over the past decade, certainly in DJJ. A sad reality that we see, especially in our major cities, is more serious crime is being committed by juveniles. And that means today we have significantly more juveniles in the DJJ facility charged with murder than we do for truancy. And challenges come along with that in each and every one of those facilities. With that said, that's going to require us to make new changes. The approach in DJJ facilities has always been one of regionalism, but I can't put a juvenile that's in for truancy, and I think we may have one, next to 5 that are pending with murder charges. right? That's not fair to that individual. And so as we look at making changes, there's going to be an impact on families that might not be as close as they were before. But the goal here is safety, and safety for the juveniles that we are housing, but also safety for our DJJ officers. I can't sit back and watch another assault of a DJJ officer. One step that we're working on now is creating a girl and female only DJJ facility. Right now, they are housed separately in secure locations in facilities that may have both boys and girls, but we are seeing with the level of violent charges for those that are in those facilities, we may need to take extra steps. We're also going to look at all of our current practices of what tools are available to those working in the facilities. They deserve to be safe and to have the tools they need to stay safe.
At what point would you consider calling in the National Guard to get situations like in Linden and Adair under control?
So we've heard before in jails and prisons when we've had understaffing about the concept of calling in the National Guard. The National Guard's not trained in corrections, either for a DJJ facility or others.
But
And
that is the concern that some of the employees working there say that they themselves are not.
Okay, let me finish, and then we'll get you the answer. I'm already talking about needing more tools for those DJJ facility folks to better protect themselves. But sending people who are fully untrained in to one of these facilities could cause as many problems as it does with solutions. So we'll be working with the DJJ employees. I think what they're going to see from me is somebody actively involved that wants to make sure they can go home to their families each and every night, and that none of them are ever assaulted, especially like what we just saw, putting somebody in the hospital ever again. Listen, these are my employees too. These are our people. These are part of Team Kentucky, and our methods haven't evolved as the population in these facilities have changed. And we're going to have to look at changes, significant changes in our policy, and that is ongoing right now. So, okay, Melissa Patrick, Kentucky Health News.
Hi, Governor. So does your medical cannabis and Delta 8 executive orders create grounds for a lawsuit based on the premise that they violate separation of powers, considering the legislature's already considered these issues in the last legislative session even and didn't pass them?
There are no grounds for a lawsuit challenging either executive order on medical cannabis. First, the one on Delta 8 is based on a specific statute. Do we have it? That says when there are substances that are unregulated, look, then the CHFS secretary has the authority to issue those regulations. That's a statute passed by the General Assembly that gives us the authority. And it's real simple on Delta 8. All of a sudden, you have this totally unregulated substance. And are they really saying they don't want me to step in and make sure that we know what's going on with it? Of course they do. And that's why they passed this. The second piece is based on the pardon power, which is directly in the Constitution. So listen, I think you're seeing a lot of reactions from people who've gotten caught up on the General Assembly versus the executive branch, or them versus me. This is not about us. It's about Jared. It's about a veteran suffering from PTSD that's had suicidal thoughts. It's about somebody suffering from chronic pain. And if they just step back and think about the people that we're trying to help, I think you'd hear a different tone. And Melissa, just with all the people that we lose every year, whether that's from an overdose or whether that's from someone suffering from PTSD that ends their life, I want them to come in and I want them to pass full-blown medical marijuana this time. But are they going to be okay with the people that we would lose until they do that, whether it's this year or next year? I'm not. No, I'm taking action because there are more Jareds out there and they deserve our help. Listen, if they want to file a lawsuit, I know how to handle those. Joe Sonka from the Courier-Journal.
Thank you. I have another question about medical marijuana orders that you had yesterday. Attorney General Cameron and Representative Jason Nemes have criticized the order, and particularly on medical marijuana, saying that you don't have the legal authority to do so, to do essentially preemptive pardons. So I'm just checking to see if you would consider that what your order is, a preemptive pardon for any people who are accused of illegal possession or use of marijuana. And secondly, I'd like to get your opinion on what effect you think this will have on the governor's race next year, both your order and any potential legal challenge that might come to it.
I'm not concerned at all about what it'll do for the governor's race. I'm concerned about people that are suffering, that deserve help and deserve access to medical marijuana like we have in 37 other states. Listen, I ran for this job because I want to help people, and that's what we are doing. And I've come a long way in my journey from being the top state prosecutor to supporting this as strongly as I do. But I've lost people to overdoses that started with opioids after injuries, and I don't want us to lose another person. And I had this moment where I was watching Will play baseball, and I think it was the umpire's wife. And first of all, I was surprised that umpire's wife come to a game, come down and sit next to me and talk about her son who'd been through 3 deployments, multiple IEDs, and the last one had been really hard on him. Listen, she deserves the help that this provides, and so does he. I've tried to be the type of governor that makes the right decision, whether it's popular or unpopular, and that's all we're doing here. But listen, we have the authority to do both of these. I mean, on Delta 8, we just showed you the statute that says if something's unregulated, we, the legislature, say you need to step in and help. But the other piece is based on the pardon power specifically in the state's constitution, and it's very similar to how we restore voting rights. That's been in now for 3 years. Not challenged would be upheld on a challenge. But remember what happens if they challenge. I mean, again, this is not about me versus them. I've admitted I want them to come back in. I want them to pass this, and I'll rescind the orders. It is not about who gets to do what. It's about who's just barely hanging on that this could help. So I'm more than confident that we have the authority. And I wish those that claim that they were for medical marijuana would actually step up and be for medical marijuana. When you let your dislike of a person cloud your judgment so much that it gets in the way of the people that you claim to want to help, it's time to step back and rethink. All right, and last, Isaiah Kim Martina. Nope. Okay, I'm headed to lunch. Wish me the best. I'm probably going to embarrass my kids significantly. We'll see you in 2 weeks. All right. Thank you all.